How should we best version our APIs?
Welcome back to the Hello World Show. I'm Heather Downing.
I'm Spencer Schneidenbach.
And we are here with...
Shawn Wildermuth.
Yes, Shawn Wildermuth. He is a Pluralsight author and international speaker. Right?
Sure.
Yes, international, correct. And he is currently doing a course on building APIs for .NET Core. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. This is exciting. Having a show that's named after my show. Oh, no.
Right?
Wait.
Yes. So I know that, Shawn, you are putting together a documentary called Hello World, right?
I am, and I've had a podcast for the last few years. It's about to end, where we do interviews of people about how they got started. And we're only doing 100, and I think we're on 91 or something like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
I think that's how we met originally, asking how I got started in that.
Yeah.
But we are honored to have the great Shawn Wildermuth with us. So tell us what you're going to teach us today.
I'm going to talk about the importance of versioning APIs and hopefully the right way.
Please tell us.
Yeah. So what happens in a lot of projects, especially in .NET projects, is that the easiest way that people do this is with, I'm just going to use slashes, API, excuse my awful handwriting, v2 new, right? That's the canonical way. It's the easy way because you can just use routing to do it, and it is also the most painful way you can do versioning. And this is something that's really important to me. So if you're not even versioning your APIs, let's talk about that first. Because I go to a lot of organizations that are like, well, versioning is just another thing we don't want to have to necessarily deal with, and our teams are in the same building, so we can just get them to agree, but that's not how the real world works. You have different versions on different machines and different integrations, and as soon as you have more than one client and more than one API, you need to start use versioning, even if it's as simple as just single, digit. You don't have to get down into semantic versioning if you don't want to be bogged by that, but having versioning is so crucial. And the reason I don't like this style of versioning so much is that it means that when someone wants to go to a new version, the URL has to change. More specifically, the path of the URL has to change. So that what happens is you say, okay, I have a 2.0 version of an API, and then I'm going to take all my old code, I'm going to editor inheritance, copy and paste it to the 2.0 version so that I have the same functionality, and then I'll change the 4 things that have changed. So now you have all this extra code to maintain. Unless you're really smart about routing, you can do some weird things with that. But in my mind, this is the one you really want to avoid. The one I'm not a big fan of, the great erasers. I'm not hugely a fan of, but I'm willing to live with, is the query string one, because then you can opt into, because the difference between these, because a lot of people argue, well, I'm still changing the URL, it's still a problem, except that query strings are optional. So the old code won't break in this case. And that's why I say, for me, it's sort of the bottom line minimum requirement. And depending on who your audience is, if you're going out to the public and you're going to have people calling this from widgets and things, sometimes the kind of user you're going to have using the API it's going to be hard to convince them to use things like headers or content types or other things. And so at a bare minimum, this is good. But if you're dealing with actual developer to actual developer, or especially within an organization, this is still a little weak to me. And that's where using headers comes in. So there's a few different ways to do this. And I'm not, I've thought a lot about the different header basis versioning, and this is, I'm not sure I have a strong opinion about which. So the easiest, obviously, is to have a header that's like X version, for lack of a better term, and then just 1.0 and 1.1. And what's nice about this is being able to say, is to also have the server output accepted versions. So that they can advertise that to people using it. If they happen to be looking at, they can say, oh, this API supports these versions, which one am I using? And this way you can have, if this is missing, a default version. And so things would just fall through. So you're only really forking the things that change. And that's one of the benefits that I really like here versus some of the others. Alternatively to X version, you'll sometimes see what's called accept or concept type, MIME type. And so you might have app JSON. I know that's not the full name, but as you can see, you shouldn't be doing it. V2, right? To actually post-pend the content type with a version. This is not uncommon out there. And the last type, which is the most work and the hardest to implement, is content type versioning. And that's where you actually have your own custom content types, and then you're using versions within them. And the benefit there, even though they're a lot more work, is if you have an API where people are getting data back, and so when they do a get ostensibly, they're getting a content type with that. It's not application JSON. It's something like v-github question mark 1.1. And you might be writing an app that caches that for 3 weeks. And GitHub, which is a big proponent of this, wants to know when you send it back, what version did you get this from originally? There's this big gap between usage and change. And that's where that really comes in. If you're really talking about something transactional, short-term transactional, you probably don't need to go to that level. But keeping in the headers is I super prefer, no matter which method of header management of the APIs you use. ASP.NET Core, in a really unknown feature I've been finding, actually supports this really cool way that will allow you to do everything but the content type versioning. Even this version they support.
Really?
Yeah. It's adding in another piece of middleware, putting in attributes or putting in custom routing if you have something special, and it just works. It's amazing. When I taught the course for ASP.NET pre-core, I don't know what to call it anymore, classic, I think it took me an hour and a half of video to teach people how to implement it. And it took 20 minutes of content to teach it in the new stuff. I mean, it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. So that's sort of my opinion about this, because one of the pieces, let me say this one last thing, that a lot of people think about, and that is that this is the unit of work for versioning, the URL, right? Because you're really thinking about it in that sense. You also have to think about versioning the payload, because if someone calls that same thing, but the shapes are different, how do you deal with those?
Right.
And that's where the custom content types become really, really useful. Having optional or extra fields is fine. Having required fields that aren't included, then everything goes to hell. And so using the content types becomes really useful.
Wow, this is one of the first times I feel like I don't have a question. You explained that so well. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us, and good luck on your movie. I'm so excited. We will announce it when it comes out so all of our followers can also follow you.
If they want to see about the movie, it's just helloworldfilm.com.
Helloworldfilm.com.
There's a teaser and some other information about the film.
We're all about it. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget to share this video on social media.
And comment below to be entered into our weekly giveaway.
Tell us what questions you have for our guests. See you next time.